Listening back and hearing some of these dates, after listening to the last few actual court hearings in this case, something just seems like sketchier now for some reason. Hey guys, this is Jules with True Crime Reactions. Disclaimer. Everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged. Yesterday, the last video we did, we went over the official documents that were released to the public when it came to Bryan Kohberger and WSU. Video looks like this. For a recap, we went over a redacted letter that we really don't know what in the world it actually is. I'm assuming it's the "you're fired" letter, which we're going to get into in this video, at least the one that we're being told exists, but that no one's ever actually seen with their own eyeballs, except for this one like crazy lady on Twitter. That's neither here nor there. Anyway, we also went over them needing him to sign permission for them to go into his WSU campus-based apartment to retrieve keys to his WSU office. And we also have a trespass letter, which, like I've mentioned 1,000 times, doesn't make sense to me. If they fired him from what they're claiming back on December the 19th, why are you trespassing somebody after they've been arrested for something? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. The two really aren't related. And if the person is no longer employed with you and is no longer a student with you when they are arrested for said crime, why are you doing anything about it at all? That doesn't make sense. So what we're going to go through in this video is what I believe to be boo-boo that NewsNation has, because they're claiming to have had exclusive information on this firing letter. Now, when it comes to the crazy Twitter lady, she ran around acting as if she had access to the actual email, but she's got no connections whatsoever to Bryan or his family or his friends or literally anyone that has anything to do with Bryan at all. And then claims that she's the one who got that information over to NewsNation. But then in her story that she told on a live that I listened to, just trying to figure out where this woman was actually coming from, her story was that the person reached out to her. But once she got a hold of the people that actually needed the information, then the other person didn't want to talk to her anymore and only would talk to the NewsNation person. So therefore, Little Miss Middleman was no longer a middleman. And so I don't really know how much information she actually saw. I don't think she saw anything, honestly. I don't know. Her story sort of came out after the NewsNation stuff started airing. So we know how people are and how they like to make up crap to make themselves relevant. I've seen nothing from her to prove that her story is true. But again, this isn't about her. So if this summons her and she gets her undies all in a twist, it ain't my problem. So I'm going to read to you what they are claiming to be the firing letter. And then we're going to go through a couple of dates. So according to NewsNation, who again is not showing the letter, they are showing their own writing of the letter as Banfield is going and reading it. They're not showing it. They never show anything with a letterhead. They never show any proof of the physicality of this thing. They don't. According to them, this is what it states. Mr. Kohberger, I am writing this letter to formally inform you of the termination of your teaching assistantship with the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology effective December 31st, 2022. In keeping with the WSU Graduate Handbook, Chapters 9G2 and 12E3, below is the list of events that led to you being deficient on the following contingency clause of your funding: maintaining satisfactory progress in fulfilling assistantship service requirements and duties. On September 23rd of 22, you had an altercation with the faculty you support as a TA, Professor Snyder, who is a man. Okay, a man. People have claimed forever that he was sexist and he has all these issues with women. If he does, he doesn't show it to anyone of authority because his female professors adore him, think he's the smartest one in the class without him apparently even being around them personally. Because from what I'm understanding, that serial killer professor that everyone freaked out about, that he was, under or whatever, he worked with her or was part of her classes remotely. So they never really ever did anything in person. And she still thought that of him. And that was something that she thought way before his arrest. And after his arrest, she's chosen not to say anything. I don't know if she said anything after the fact since it's been a while, but in the beginning, she just refused to talk about it. So again, this is altercations with a male professor, not a female. I met with you on October 3rd to discuss norms of professional behavior. On October 21st, Professor Snyder emailed you about the ways in which you had failed to meet your expectations as a TA thus far in the semester. As a result, on November 2nd, Graduate Director Willits and I met with you to discuss an improvement plan, which you agreed to and I shared with you in an email dated November 3rd. We met again on December 7th, this time with Professor Snyder, as well as Dr. Willits and I, to discuss your progress on the improvement plan. While not perfect, we agreed that there was progress. So within just a few weeks of the crimes, he's like gaining progress and doing better in class. Not perfect, but you're progressing. Again, I feel like this was just two males that just did not click. This could have been avoided and corrected if they would have just switched some stuff around. Just because he was a TA for this professor doesn't mean it had to stay that way. There are things that could have been done, and it just sounds like they were concrete on leaving things the way they were. I mean, this literally could have been Professor Snyder being an a-hole, or just literally his personality and Bryan's personality not connecting. It happens all the time, especially in the workplace. On December 9th, there was another altercation with Professor Snyder, in which it became apparent that you had not made progress regarding professionalism, and about which I wrote to you on December 11th requesting a meeting. December 11th would have been like the day they left, him and his dad left Pullman. It was somewhere between the 10th and the 12th because of where they have him on radar with his plate being red. And then, of course, we have the Indiana stops on, I believe, the 15th of December. So he was either like leaving that day or he left the very next day. But this goes on to then state, we met on December 19th when I informed you of your termination as a TA for spring semester. This would have had to have been virtually if it's true. I mean, I can't see a school really like coming out and lying about this kind of stuff because that's a lawsuit in itself, right? 10 days in between December 9th and December 19th, he's being told already on the 9th and on the 11th that you're in hot water, things are not good, but he's still doing his job and grading papers on the 16th after he gets to Pennsylvania. It doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't. And if he knew that he was in hot water, why didn't he take all his stuff with him and just go back home? If he knew already that he wasn't going to be able to continue this, why didn't he just take all his crap and leave? Now, this does say that he met with them on December 19th. Okay, but so he just decided to not go back and get his stuff? Because he didn't get arrested until December 30th. So that's 11 days. And it's not like he didn't have the money to get back. His whole plan, right, was to go back in the first place. So why didn't he just go back and get his stuff, clean out his apartment in those 11 days and get it done and over with during Christmas break when like nobody would be around? That would be logical in this situation. So yeah, I don't. Now the problem I have with all of this is that Ashley Banfield says herself that they have 3 sources, but none of them are WSU because WSU refuses to speak about it. So then how are you sitting here invalidating you coming out and claiming that this is legit? Especially whenever you're not showing it. If you actually had an email or actually had a physical letter proof of this, why wouldn't you be showing it? Anybody could have written that email and told you, oh, this is what Bryan Kohberger got. I mean, the school isn't coming out and like saying anything about it. Instead, they're being asked about Bryan like after his arrest, where he's obviously already not allowed and everything about him is removed. So of course their answers are going to be, he's not a student, he's not a TA. Yeah, you're asking after the fact. You're asking after the fact. Just like Bryan Inton is saying that he's going in and he's asking students about Bryan after the fact. And after the fact, they get a weird, creepy vibe from the guy. But would it have been that way prior to his arrest? Or are you just catering to the newsman so that you can get on the camera? Serious question. So in regard to WSU literally not having a single statement on it, this other anchor from a sister station named Melissa, she went ahead and got something from WSU. But again, they're not showing that actual proof. It's just them putting their own texting on the screen. So anyway, it states this, and again, this is the response to a sister station from WSU when asked about Bryan Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger received an appointment as a teaching assistant at Washington State University during the fall 2022 semester. It is typical for students to receive a teaching assistantship or similar appointment as part of their PhD program. Mr. Kohberger does not currently have a teaching assistantship, and he is not currently enrolled at WSU. Well, no crap. He's in jail. This is after the fact. This isn't any information whatsoever from the school itself from the 19th of December to December 30th, the day of his arrest. Of course, after the fact, he no longer is a TA and he is no longer a student. This does not validate, verify, clarify a hot damn thing. Okay? It doesn't. Let's quit playing. It closes by stating, information concerning a student's teaching assistantship is considered a student record. The Federal Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, prevents universities from discussing student records. As a result, I am unable to comment on Mr. Kohberger's experience as a teaching assistant. So, if the redacted letter that I showed you guys in the last video is this actual letter that Ashley Banfeld is reading out loud, why aren't they showing it? You're literally already out here reading it verbatim, obviously sort of like against FERPA, honestly. I mean, it's not the school that's giving out that information, but I'm really kind of wondering now, because of this like law that NewsNation very carefully implemented into this little segment, right? I wonder if her whole, we have 3 sources, but WSU won't respond, is literally them just protecting their actual source. Because this letter could be legit. Okay, he could have actually had issues and been arguing with a male professor, not a female professor, because they butted heads and maybe something was just like not right between the two of them. But their timeline for this is incorrect for their stupid theory. Why would he have committed all of these crazy murders prior to him losing his job when their very first thing about this is, what if he just needed a trigger? What if he just needed a push? Something like a loss, or maybe losing your job and your ability to become a student again? No, all of that happened after the murders, which would make that portion of his life literally irrelevant to the crime because it happened a month after. If he would have committed these, or if some crazy crap that he would have been accused of would have happened literally right after him losing his job, sure, maybe I'd look at you a little differently. But you're telling me that something happened after the murders is the reason for why the murders happened. And that doesn't make any freaking logical sense. I don't understand how NewsNation and Coffin Gagger over there doesn't understand that. Am I like losing my mind, or am I the only one thinking clearly here? But then you also go in and you look at these dates. And we've heard from several sources now, from the hearings, that they really didn't have any information about Bryan Kohberger being an actual suspect until like around December 22nd, December 23rd. And I find that interesting because of what she says here.
If you think about the dates, December 22nd, if he's withdrawn from the data system in that university, he still hasn't been arrested until December 30th, that Friday night.
So if he was fired on the 19th, but still had access to his information till the 22nd, that also doesn't make any sense. That's not how that works. Literally at all. That's not how that works. But then we also have some boo-boo that Bloom said. Now, I fully believe that those 2 traffic stops were orchestrated by the feds. Not just because they first came out and took responsibility, but then in the responsibility also had to admit that they lost him, and then they backtracked that. But because there's no way in shit that it wasn't orchestrated. How do you get pulled over twice in just a handful of minutes and nobody really does the traffic stop by protocol either time? That didn't make sense. The feds did it. Ain't no way around it. So that kind of goes back to something Bloom said. If true that the feds and Moscow PD, there's a bunch of animosity there, and that the feds didn't instantly give them information on Bryan for a while. So we know that it wasn't until they got this little family tree over to Moscow PD that they then said, your guy is in this family tree, figure it out, is kind of how it's kind of like been relayed to us anyway. But would they have been like sniffing around the school, the feds, before Moscow would have had this information on the 23rd of December? Could them doing something a whole 10 days later and in the middle of Christmas break, in the literal middle of Christmas break, no one is in class, as far as I can remember. No one is in class. They are literally in the middle of winter break. Could the feds sniffing around be a reason for them to just go ahead and ixnay him? Because the little things that they're claiming are the reasonings why in the handbook really don't make a lot of sense at all. So here's the handbook. This isn't like just a picture. As you guys can see, this is the whole damn 131 pages. Okay. So the first one that they mention here is 9G2. Okay. So I'm going to read the whole thing. All right. Chapter 9, Section G, number 2 states the following: termination mid-semester. Departments and programs working with a graduate assistant should provide adequate supervision and training so that assistants can be successful in their positions. Appointment responsibilities and clear expectations should be provided in writing, along with written feedback and opportunities for improvement in performance. Performance factors may include, but are not limited to, quality of work, quantity of work, job knowledge, working relationships, and attendance. For those students who encounter performance difficulties, supervisors are to contact the graduate school for advice. In accordance with the procedures below, a supervisor may recommend termination of an assistantship mid-semester to the department chair or director as applicable for reasons such as continual deficient performance or misconduct while performing the duties of the assistantship, misconduct while engaging in other educational activities, violation of the university's academic integrity policies, or violation of the university's standards of conduct for students. Now, that right there literally could just be, well, you are like the main and only suspect in a quadruple homicide that kind of goes against what we allow our students to do here. It could literally be something that simple. Except in very serious cases of misconduct, a department that seeks termination of an assistantship mid-semester must have previously informed the assistant in writing of the specific deficient performance and or misconduct and must have given the assistant a reasonable opportunity to correct the deficiencies. If the assistant fails to satisfactorily correct the deficiencies or conduct within the designated time, the department or director may issue a written notice of termination for cause. The written notice of termination should state the specific reasons for the action and provide the assistant with an opportunity to appeal the decision. Termination of an assistantship is subject to appeal in accordance with the graduate and professional students' grievance procedures set forth in Chapter 12E3, which is the other one that they actually put in his SOSE letter. Again, probably not going to be specific. The decision is held in abeyance pending the outcome of the appeal. If the student needs to be removed from a specific project immediately, the department should reassign the student to departmental funding and or other duties until a final decision is made regarding the appointment. So did Bryan try to appeal this? That's something that we haven't heard. I work with medical appeals all day long, but did Bryan appeal this decision? Because it sounds like if he would have, they would have done what I just said could have happened to begin with. He could have been moved to another department, not like learning wise, but like another professor. He could have been doing something different, like this says here. If no appeal is filed, the department may proceed with the paperwork to terminate the appointment. Once the period for filing an appeal has ended, the termination of the appointment will occur retroactively as of the date of the termination notice and may result in the termination of the tuition waivers provided to the assistant as a benefit associated with the appointment. What's the filing deadline? It didn't say. It doesn't say at all. And I'm going to skip down here because it says something right here. To appeal the findings or sanctions imposed by the standards of conduct for students, the student must follow the appeal process outlined in the standards of conduct. All right, well, I'll check that in a second. I got a couple more sentences, so let's finish this. If the tuition waivers are terminated, the student may be responsible for the full tuition cost or a prorated in-state and out-of-state as applicable tuition cost for that semester. If an appeal is filed, the student must remain in an assistantship position pending a decision by the dean of the graduate school. If the appeal is denied, then termination is effective the date of the denial notice of the student. So this is something sort of like the medical field stuff that I deal with too, stuff that goes back retroactively. So was there an appeal? Because they're claiming that the letter that we still have no actual physical proof of was sent out to Bryan on the 19th of December, and then he was arrested on the 30th, but they didn't send him information for getting keys or anything like that until after the fact. And again, I don't understand if someone has been fired as a TA, lost their funding, and is no longer going to be coming back to the school, why are you having to give them a trespass notice? That just doesn't make sense. Okay, so now we're going to go down to chapter 12, section E, number 3, because that's the other one, conveniently also labeled in the other one. So they pretty much just like go hand in hand, I guess. Graduate and professional student complaint and grievance procedures. The graduate student complaint and formal grievance processes can involve several steps depending on the nature of the issue. There are many avenues available to Washington State University graduate students to resolve differences that might arise during the pursuit of an advanced degree. If a graduate program has its own grievance procedures, these procedures should be followed before utilizing the graduate school's grievance procedures. So if the criminal justice department had their own ways of doing things, those would have been implemented prior to the school's very vague and generic ways took over, if that makes any sense. In general, the operational principle that should be followed is to maintain open communication at the most immediate point of access and to work upwards from there when appropriate. This means that students should work with their major professor or advisor to resolve matters if possible. The next level would be the program director, department chair, or school director. If the complaint involves a complex or multi-campus issue, the dean of the college may get involved at this point in the process. Not gonna lie, that sentence has my attention. Multi-campus issue. See, that's why, again, I'm like, okay, is all of this literally because of him being arrested as the suspect? Because what else could be considered a multi-campus issue? And I know that it says or, okay, I understand it says or, but still, it's interesting that it's worded that way. There are cases, of course, where this is difficult. In these cases, graduate students should make an appointment with a member of the graduate school leadership team for further advice. An important role of the graduate school is to serve as an impartial arbitrator in these matters and to provide advice to both students and faculty with the intent of helping the student continue in good academic standing. A. Graduate student complaint procedures. Students are encouraged to first consult with their faculty advisor. If the advisor is unable to resolve the problem, the student is encouraged to discuss the problem with the department or program chair and or an appropriate faculty liaison such as the graduate program director or departmental ombudsman. If the complaint cannot be resolved at the department or program level, the student then should contact a member of the graduate school leadership team. The dean or the dean's designee will review the complaint and will recommend possible actions for resolution to the student as well as to the department, program chair, director, college dean, and or faculty liaison. Graduate student formal grievance procedures. In some instances, such as those related to academic and employment issues, the student may wish to appeal a specific decision made by the department or program faculty. Maybe we'll finally get a deadline. Oh, I think we do. I think I see it. Okay. The student must make a formal grievance request to the dean of the graduate school in writing with signature. An email is not sufficient. However, an electronic version of the signed appeal sent from the student's WSU email is acceptable. The student must submit documentation describing the grounds for a formal grievance to the dean. Formal grievances must be filed within 15 calendar days following a notice of decision. So if this letter is true, which I doubt until we see it physically, it was dated for the 19th. So he would have had technically 3 business weeks, Monday through Friday, 3 times, in order to file an appeal. He was arrested 11 days after the date of the SOSE letter, but I don't have a calendar in front of me to see how many of those days were calendar days. We're just going to say probably, like, given the fact it's 10 days, let's say 4 of those days were the weekend. He had like 5 days. He only had like really a week, one business week to file anything. The dismissal will be held in abeyance until the university has rendered a final decision. However, progression through degree requirements, such as continued course enrollment, research activities, internships, or clinical training activities, may be suspended. Okay, so that tells me right there that he wouldn't have had access to all of his stuff. Now, I know that we're seeing that he was grading papers on the 16th. I think in one of my other videos, I said it was the 26th. I was incorrect. Obviously, the timestamps show the 16th. So that in itself is honestly irrelevant to the argument anyway. Okay. The dean may assign these formal grievances to one of the associate/assistant deans for full consideration and recommendation. If the dean deems it appropriate, the matter may be referred to an independent committee on graduate student rights and responsibilities for consideration and formulating recommendations of action to the dean of the graduate school. This committee will operate with due respect to the rights of graduate students, faculty, administrators, including the conduct of interviews, the right of all parties to review and address allegations, and the right to a fair hearing. Basically, exactly what he's doing right now, but on a way smaller level. The committee will deliberate and render a recommendation to the dean of the graduate school or the dean's designee within 60 calendar days of being formed. Recommendations for resolution of formal grievances will be acted upon by the dean or the dean's designee. The dean of the graduate school will make a final decision. The decision made by the dean on academic matters are final. Graduate student appeals procedures. If the graduate student believes there was a procedural error or failure to follow WSU or graduate school policy during the complaint or grievance process, an appeal of the decision made by the dean of the graduate school can be made to the provost. The written appeal to the provost regarding procedural irregularities must be filed within 15 calendar days following the notice of the decision from the dean of the graduate school in response to the formal grievance. The appeal must be copied to the dean of the graduate school. If the dean of the graduate school does not receive a copy of the appeal within 15 calendar days, the student's rights to appeal will be waived and the dean's decision will be final. The provost will not reopen cases for the purpose of reinvestigating the grievance. So you file an appeal within those 15 days or you don't get a chance to argue your fight. And honestly, with everything that we're kind of being told about Bryan Kohberger, does he seem like somebody who would have just like taken it? Everyone is acting like he had to be the smartest man in the room and everyone had to know he was the smartest man in the room. Okay. So you're telling me that he had like plenty of time, honestly, sitting on his butt at his parents' house and he didn't file an appeal? It doesn't sound right. Now, I'm going to show you guys, this thing is long. I'm not reading all of that. It's honestly irrelevant at this point. I just wanted to cite you guys the rules that they're claiming in this SOSE letter because it's not specific to anything real, but that's it. That's the information from NewsNation that came out without showing any proof, no letterheads, no actual anything with a date on it besides him grading papers on December 16th. Whereas the information that I have that I showed you that kind of like goes against the story that NewsNation is pushing with no proof has actual documentation and dates to back it up. So Howard Bloom is just automatically choosing to listen to NewsNation? Because if they're little three sources, you're telling me you have 3 sources? How do you have 3 sources and then still no actual physical paperwork? How does that work? I found this interesting.
We also heard, if you don't remember, Ashley, about there was an issue. We maybe had an issue with like a pride flag on a door in one of the school buildings there.
Especially since earlier today I had this comment. Now, what if that was the argument between him and Snyder? When it comes to he had issues with the pride flag, could Professor Snyder and him had been arguing about if that should be allowed up or not, and that's the big fight? Because we don't really know, do we? We don't. We don't know if somebody on the LGBTQ, whatever over there might think that Bryan was the person, or maybe like wanted to point him out as being the person because they didn't like how he was against what they are. Because that's possible. And I don't claim to know everything. I just know that I'm not going to just listen to hearsay with no proof and ignore the actual factual documents we have with official stamps and stuff that comes from jails and court documents with dates and things. Why would I ignore all of that and listen to Banfield, who's doing nothing but showing me their own texted out writing while telling me that the school itself refuses to make a statement? That means nothing that they're telling us can be validated, but everything I showed you in that last video can be, because I show you the proof. Now, again, there could be things here that are missing. There probably is a lot here that's missing. But the story they're trying to tell us right now doesn't add up to the proof that we see. So if they want us to change our minds, they're going to have to stop this stupid ass gag order, and they're going to have to let some information out, or I'm going to keep pushing against what they have to say until it makes sense. It's just that simple. But that is it, you guys. If you like the way that I present this information and give my opinion, please do not forget to leave a like on the way out and subscribe to the channel if you were not subscribed already. See y'all.